frequency. So sometimes if there's a major knot, I want to choose a tuning fork that works with a higher frequency. It'll buzz much stronger. And sometimes these frequencies are enough to actually allow these knots to release and disengage and soften.
And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
That day I walked out, I felt a little bit better, and by the next day it was a lot better, and the next day it was totally better. So absolutely, it was fantastic, and I was so excited. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to her today. So let's go into some of the more esoteric things. We both have done some shamanic work, and I remember you talking once about seeing animals, and I thought that'd be really neat to talk about now, is it an actual animal, is it like a totem animal, or is this aspect of the self that's personifying itself as an animal?
It's a very interesting question. I feel like there is really so much that we don't know. There's so much that I don't know. The way that I work with animal totem energy is, a lot of the times I feel like these are animals just like guides that are with us to either encourage specific ways of thinking or pursuing a situation maybe that's unfolding in your life. I know that I have a lion that comes around with me. I also identify as a gray wolf, so I've got that like sort of pack animal energy. I'm very intuitively a protector, and I'm very loyal. So that's how, for example, like the gray wolf energy would feed into sort of my personality traits and how I identify as a person. But then when I'm in session and I'm opening up, and I had mentioned earlier a rhinoceros just sort of like charged through, I was just kind of like, whoa, okay, what's this all about? So I just share with my client, like, so I just saw like a rhino charge in. So the energy of the rhino is important. Like maybe that when you read the animal,
protective.
Yeah, or like on guard, ready to go, energized.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Or an unstoppable force maybe in your life.
Exactly. And so at that point, like I had never worked with rhino energy before, so I suggested to this person, go home, look up like rhinoceros animal totem information, and you'll read what you need to hear, just kind of like a tarot or an oracle reading. Like you will read the same card that hundreds of other people have touched and read, but being you and in this direct moment, you will receive the message that is unique.
Right,
yes.
Of course, sure.
And that's, I guess, how I approach working with these animal totems is, why is this animal here? What's going on in your life? And what resonates with you based on the power that this animal sort of holds. Yeah.
Interesting.
It is. It's so captivating.
I had my own experiences. I remember I was at Outward Bound, and we had what's called a 3-day solo, and we were only given a tarp, and we were given just a tiniest bit of food. We mostly were fasting, and we were by ourselves for the first time in our entire life, and you couldn't see anybody. You were in the woods. You were by a river. Now, if you stepped out to the river, you could see someone else, but we were just pretty much our own. I was 16 years old or 17 years old. I don't remember exactly the age, but it was my first time being alone. And I remember I was doing a lot of shamanic work, and I remember waking up and having this giant hawk just spiraling over my head. And I remember feeling this incredible sense of change. Like it was almost like this was my awakening to becoming a man at that time. And just this sense of connection with the animals, connection with the forest, connection with the animal sense of myself. Because when you strip away all the people, we get back to our animal nature. We become like the animals. We feel the ground, we feel the earth, we feel the air, the water in a different way, because we're not conceptualizing it as water in a glass. We're feeling the water and experiencing the water. We're feeling the rocks, experiencing the rocks. And we're feeling the sunset in a very different way, as if there's no concept other than the fact of it being a direct experience. And in that time I did have a lot of awakenings with shamanic senses of plants. And I remember taking from a plant. I remember having an offering, and I didn't have anything to offer, so I put a dime. I remember giving a dime, because that's all I had to offer in return. And in Native tradition, you have to, in order to take, you have to give a blessing, or you have to give in order to receive. And that's all I had to offer was that dime. But I remember finding the dime and being able to offer something back to that plant that I was taking all the delicious fruit from at the time. It was wonderful.
You touched on something really interesting there, where you were talking about animals and how you know, using that energy can get you really like deeper down, sort of almost how I was understanding was like out of the head, you know, because we are animals.
Sure.
We're evolved animals, so we like to spend a lot of time up here in our heads because we like to think that we're better than animals. But really, I think we're all just a bunch of animals, you know, and that is actually part of it. Sometimes like it's just really helpful to like engage with somebody else's perspectives on things, and it'll sort of bear its fruit of other aspects, and that's what sort of came through for me. Was it's like, yeah, like these beautiful animal totems sort of bring us back to our roots. And yes, we're always going to intellectualize and conceptualize because we have this beautiful big brain up here that you love so much. But you know, there are things that like animals just intuitively do because they don't have the option to come up here that works really well. And I think a lot of us could probably do good with being a little bit more primal, or dancing, or shaking, or
that's
roaring,
what you do.
or
we're definitely talking about a course to do where you're doing movement based, and I'm doing some trance channeling work because we think that'd be a really neat head body connection. So stay tuned. We'll probably have something like that in the future. And yeah, well, movement is fantastic. So tell me, you do dance and yoga. What's your background on movement?
My background in movement, well, when I was 16, I started getting into weightlifting, and that became like a big part of sort of my lifestyle. As you were talking about masculine and feminine, I think earlier on in my life, I always found it really easy and safe to really sink into my masculine side. And then since my sort of being in remission after my diagnosis, I had to step into more of my feminine, excuse me, more of my, even now my body's like, you're not there yet.
Left side, get back to the left side.
Trying to balance and sink into more of like my feminine energy. But I think just innately my body likes to move more. So I had that first connection with weights and with more of that aggressive active movement release. And then I found yoga, and I actually dropped the weights and stopped weightlifting and was doing a lot of CrossFit. I went right just into more so calisthenics, working with my body weight, working with yoga. I like to engage in yoga from a place of let's learn how to turn off the mind and the judgments and come back inwards and practice communicating with what the body is saying, specifically around pain and injury.
Sure.
Like a lot of people get really bummed out, really angry, bitter, shameful around injuries, like, why this again? I'm so young, or I'm getting old.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be like that. It could be like oh wow, body, I'm so sorry that I've been ignoring you. Like, I'm so sorry that I've been ignoring what you've been saying to the point that now you've had to slip out one of my discs because I wasn't listening, because I was bending over backwards for other people, or
literally,
you know, not listening to what my body was saying. And yoga is the opportunity where I can start to correct repetitive body movement issues, where I can start to learn, like, or start articulating, like, what do these sensations mean? I just said that in my class that I taught this morning, you know, when we're doing a 90-minute class in the heat, and we're doing a pose like pigeon pose, where we're getting deep into the hip flexor and into the hip socket and the glutes. It's really important to know the difference between a stretch and pain.
Right.
Like, it's really important to articulate, like, what exactly are you feeling in your hip socket? Because if it's grinding, that's probably not helpful.
Right.
If it's releasing and stress relieving, then yeah, that is good, that is your medicine.
Right.
And also reminding people that, like, every yoga pose is not going to be your medicine.
You know, when you say that about pain, that's an interesting topic too, is that when as a personal trainer, there's good pain and bad pain. And good pain is where it feels like a dull ache, and then there's a release. You're holding it, and you're waiting, and then there's that release. And this is a trained thing. This doesn't happen. Well, my first client, when I pushed and suddenly it happened, it's the body gets comfortable, and it's like, and I can go a little further. I turn and can go a little further. And that's good pain. Bad pain is when you get a sharp stabbing thing where it's basically telling your body's telling you, okay, you gotta stop right now.
But there's no pain, there's no gain.
Right,
like,
of course.
Like, we have all these societal ideas around pain, though, and seriously, like, I'll go over to someone and they're in a pose and they're shaking, and I'm like, how are you doing? Are you okay? And they're like, oh yeah, my knee just really hurts. I'm like, okay, well, please slowly come out. Like, this is not the place to have to force yourself into more pain. This is the place to actually remedy that and to listen and to give yourself permission to step back.
You know, we'll say that I actually had personal left pain in my knee, and it was from trust from a relationship. We had talked about that. Where my trust had been broken. And I always had this left knee pain, and acupuncture helps when I was 15 years old. But it wasn't until I started training, and when I exercised, I actually put my heart into my knee. And I said to my knee, when I was doing lunges or squats or or heavy lifting, I would put my heart into that knee every time I took a step, and I would just reinforce that relationship between the heart and the knee. And the knee, the pain just totally subsided.
Right.
And this was actually, I was 15 years old when I had that first injury. And I can say this year, now I'm 42 years old, that I can say that knee pain's absolutely gone. And what I had to do is I had to pull out of the fear, I had to put my heart into the knee and train my heart into the place of weakness. Mm-hmm. And that heart is really important, because as you train your emotional heart, you're actually pumping blood from there. The blood contains metal. The metal connects to electromagnetic pulsing from the AV bundle in our heart. And when the intention is to go to something, and you empower that heart to take that metal and put the electromagnetic pulse towards a directed focus, it goes exactly where it wants to go, and the emotions and the positive feelings go into the part where it needs to heal. And I found that was really important for athletes to,
for sure.
to train into their muscle, feel the muscle, feel the bones, feel the joints, and train into it in a positive way where you feel like it's being supported, connected to emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And when everything's going about healing that thing will change. It can't stay still. It just has to move.
For sure, and sort of combining this like energetic conceptualization of that as well as like the hard science. I remember in my first weight training class in high school, my teacher was specifically talking about like actually visualize and think about your bicep as you're doing this bicep curl, because there is evidence that as we think about the body part and the movement that we're doing, we're actually increasing the efficiency of that.
Well, that's doing visualization.
So,
absolutely.
intention setting.
Yeah. But so if whatever you think about the body does not get recorded by the body. It's what you visualize and feel about the body
right.
holds on to. So if you're visualizing a bicep and you're flexing a bicep, you're visualizing it flex, the action potentials go in there and maximize their flex.
Yeah.
But if you go there and you're thinking about your homework or whatever, and you do like 4 sets and you're like, oh, I just really don't feel anything.
Enough, I'm not strong enough.
Not enough. That's the worst. That is, okay, so with the athletes that I've worked with, the not enough is like literally your death sentence.
For sure.
And I remember watching Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the old days and the pumping iron. And okay, maybe a little narcissism, but that's okay. He's a showman. But he was training as if I'm a god. I'm feeling like a god, and he created his own reality where his body's responding because he had this incredible positive idea. Mm-hmm. And when he was interviewed, he was thinking about the gods and the Greek gods and the idea of having this perfection of body, but having that sense of self-efficacy and that joy of working. And when you're working out with joy, it's totally different than if you're working out with not enough. Not enough will be a lot of not enough, and you will never have enough. It becomes a vicious cycle.
And even on a vibrational level, like that joy, that excitement, that confidence, those are all like much higher vibrations, and that I'm not enough.
Sure.
I'll never get there. That's a very low vibration, and we want to grow. We want to expand, right?
So yeah, I guess it has to do with perception of self, but maybe being fully yourself in the moment. Yeah. Maybe that existential idea of being who you fully are at every given moment, that if you can use that into some kind of action or behavior, that will have a resonance and they'll carry it through in a positive way.
This sort of brings into question, and I've heard people talk about it, and I've sort of talked about it and explored it in my own mind and practice. But how does your work sort of evolve with individuals? Like, do people have to believe in your work
not at all.
For it to actually happen?
No, but I do. I meet them halfway. So I do a combination of 3 visualizations. One is activating what's called the Kundalini energy, and I have a nice visualization about that. One's the heart, and one's the pineal. And I say, look, it doesn't matter what you believe. I want you to visualize these things, and you're going to meet me halfway. And once you've met me halfway, I can do the concussion therapy that I do, which is taking those energies, blending them together, and it's almost like a permission slip that people are now available and ready. And I teach this in my course, actually, in the classes I do, of these 3 things, because those 3 things actually have specific points in your brain that I meld together and use that as my energy field to pull that energy through the brain. And I'm using, I guess you can call it all those different aspects, all those different energy centers, especially the heart. I think the heart is one of the most important, especially when I'm dealing with the head. And I think that if I can harness all those 3 things together, I can cause energetic shifts. And one of the side effects I tell people, and I don't care what kind of athlete they are, what kind of sport they are, you're going to become a medical intuitive, and the reason, or become a visionary or seer or a performer. And the reason why is because you will have this pineal activated, and you can't turn that off. Once it turns on, the dreams start, the visions start, or for athletes, they have that peak moment, that moment where they're in that sport where they say the shot took itself. They had the hockey stick and they didn't see it, but they had a knowingness. And the knowingness, they popped it up, and just then the goalie pulled out and it went in. And it was what they call a fluky shot. But they said, no, it's this moment where they're in this zone, they're in this flow. And it's really hard for athletes to get into that flow. They have to train that flow. But activating the Kundalini energy, activating the heart, activating the pineal gland, putting them all together, puts them in that state of flow very easily. And that's one of the things that I like working on with athletes specifically.
Well, I remember when we first had like our first sort of phone session, you helped me actually, when I was talking about my slip disc, that was actually my experience that I was talking about earlier. You helped, I felt like this like explosion, this like erosion directly in like the direct spot, like little speck of where my injury was, and you guided me through, I remember this Kundalini visualization, which was very vulnerable and like enticing, and we built rapport to do that within like 5 minutes, which is amazing. I remember.
And hi, how you doing? Let's work on the Kundalini, okay?
Yeah.
No, but that's how it was. We just like I was talking about my knee. We store feelings of people and emotions, and when we're working with the spine is 100% Kundalini energy. I respect Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner. But Reiki energy is great for anxiety, but when it comes to the spine has its own frequencies. It's got, as you work with the tuning forks, it's got its own closed system, if you will. And I call it a weak electromagnetic closed system. And working with that closed system